There is one thought that I've been having after, what happened at the Capitol on the 6th, which is, I guess you would say, a lack of urgency around what happened. And I know this is not connected to the impeachment, it's not connected to, the Republican Party sort of having its own little civil war and having to face, like, what are we now? Or, the case with our new freshman senator who has to, decide whether she believes in Jewish space lasers, or Liz Cheney voting for impeachment. I'm not talking about any of that. What I'm talking about is something far more serious, and for some reason, no one is talking about it. And that is that normally, your capital never gets attacked. Countries that have their seat of government get attacked whether from a foreign enemy or by, an internal domestic one, normally don't. That's when they're in decline. That means, they're very vulnerable. It's a signal to the rest of the surrounding countries and the rest of the world that uh, if you want to remove them from the board, or if they're a very large and powerful country, it's very easy to tie up their resources with even small acts of aggression, whether that's via trade policy, military action, and so on. Historically, this is sort of like a very good signal that they're vulnerable, and that's us right now. We are in shark infested waters, and we are hemorrhaging blood. We're bleeding so heavily that we're not even sure all of the places we're bleeding from. It's bad. It's really bad. And that is, well, you know, bleeding is not good. Bleeding in water is not good. Bleeding in water with sharks is even worse. And the idea of sharks as cold blooded killing machines that do not think except for murder is a fantasy, written by Hollywood that some of the people who made that fantasy deeply regret. Sharks can think, they have rich internal lives like any other animal. And that actually makes them far more dangerous in this situation for this particular metaphor, because if we think of all the sharks as having, ability to think, plot, and act independently, that makes us being vulnerable far more scary and dangerous, because attack could come now, attack could come anytime in the future. It really depends on how they sense us, sense our vulnerability, and they could even collude if they feel like they're going to bite off more than they can chew. So I really think that we should, as a sort of state of national security, we are very vulnerable right now. And if the new president, Biden, doesn't consider, really, I'm not saying that we need to, go code orange or red or whatever mode, a lockdown of, national security would supposed to be. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that we need to take a very hard look at how we got here, and then sort of decide as a democracy, not as a totalitarian state, because that is exactly how we would lose, what America is, but as a multi ethnic democracy, how do we leave this predicament? How do we stop being vulnerable? How do we hold the people who caused this accountable? And then how did we get here in the first place? That is what we need to be doing right now. And honestly, what I see this system doing right now is perpetuating the problems that got us here. Obsessing over partisan conflicts, obsessing over the minutia of the day, not the deep underlying problems. And only in the moments of the thing can be like respect the historical problem and then realize, oh hey, we're in danger. But then the news keeps on coming, the cycle keeps on coming, and then we lose our focus, and then we get dragged out back to sea, and we're just treading water, and we're not thinking about the problem at hand. That are going to be our challenge, and the systems that are in place right now are not going to save us. it's going to be down to us to figure that out. And that's kind of a heavy burden, but that's part of what being a citizen in a democracy means. And I'll be honest, I haven't really been pulling my weight. I've been focusing on myself, and that's also part of what being a free person in democracy means. You're not obligated to neglect yourself and, interests of the state. But you do have to balance those two responsibilities, and that's where we should have had our discussions. Our discussions should have been around that, and they haven't been. And that's another problem that I will have to address in another video. But what obligations do we have to democracy? What obligations do we have to ourselves? And how does that, be part of our lives, our discussions? This is going to have to be a much bigger topic, and I just wish that, one, we are in an emergency, but an emergency that is not made better by panic. And I think that we can get through this, but only through recognizing the inherent qualities that make a democracy strong. So that's where I'm going to put my focuses on, and I hope that if anyone does see this, my little depository of thoughts, that hopefully you'll think on this too.